This is Bharat FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत.
ये है भारत FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Storytellers Cafe for our winter special. Today is 1st of November and we have changed. In India, we have moved ahead by 1 hour because to align ourselves with the daylight savings in the United States, it's still 11:30 a.m. there, but it's 10 p.m. in India. So we are changing. How are you, my friends? Hope everyone is staying safe, masked, and keeping social distancing. Well, sit back for the next half hour. You can lounge, you can relax, and listen to Vidya Shah, our special guest for Storytellers Cafe tonight. Welcome to a world of incredible women of black and white era, of the salon, the tawaifs, the stories, riddles, anecdotes, photographs, and songs, the beginning of the world of entertainment of the gramophone era. Vidya Shah will give us a glimpse of the Baigees in the early 20th century gramophone era tonight. So, like she says, sit back on your cushions, bolsters, satin throws, as Vidya takes us back into the world of the salon and the beginnings of the studio. Vidya Shah is a composer and musician from New Delhi, India. She was initially trained in Carnatic music and later received guidance in the North Indian genre of Khayal from Shubha Mudgal and Mujahid Hussain Khan, and Thumri Dadra and Ghazal from Shanti Hiranand. Vidya has performed at national and international forums, including the Tansen Samaroh in Gwalior, the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., and the Asia Society in New York, and the British Museum in London. Vidya has several releases with leading labels, including Times Music and 6 Degrees Music, California. A popular performer and a prolific composer, Vidya has worked and performed with leading musicians, including the Grammy Award-winning Ghatam Wizard Pt.Vikku Vinayakaram, and the electronica artists like Karsh, Kale, and MiDival Punditz. Vidya is also the recipient of the Charles Wallace Award and a senior fellowship from the Government of India for her project, Women on Record. We will be talking about it a little more tonight. A performance highlighting the contributions of the forgotten women performers in the gramophone era. Her special performances also include The Last Mughal, in performance with author William Dalrymple, Akhtari, The Life of Begum Akhtar, and Bas Tu Hi, a rendition of Sufiana Kalam. Vidya also writes and speaks on music and is the author of Jalsa, Indian Women's Journey from the Salon to the Studio, published by the Tulika Books. That should interest all storytellers here. Vidya also features in conversation series with artists on the national television channel, where she has spoken to leading artists like Ustad Amjad Ali Khan, Pandit Birju Maharaj, Pandit Shiv Kumar Sharma. Vidya is also the recipient of Vidya is the Nana Shirgaonkar Chair Professor for the Indian Music at Goa University. So Welcome, Vidya, to Storytellers Cafe. I extend a
Thank
very
you.
warm welcome.
Thank you, Usha. Delighted to be on your radio channel, Bharat FM. It's wonderful to see that there's so many lovers of Indian culture all over the world, and I'm delighted to be a slice of this moment as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Vidya. Vidya, you have an illustrious career, spanning, I guess, a couple of decades. And you started your journey with Carnatic music. How did you switch over to Hindustani classical? And
Uh,
also, you did mention, sorry, that you like to weave stories around music. So, could you tell us about that?
So, well, this is the Storytellers Cafe, and let me just tell you that the world of Indian music really rests on stories, and it would be so lifeless without the anecdotes on which we build our music, from which we derive our inspiration. So, it's great that you've invited me, although I'm a musician, to come and share some of these quirky moments from our lives and from the lives of these women who I love to talk about, as you know. But in terms of my own journey, I was born into a South Indian family, but I grew up in North India. So I was always exposed to various genres of music, and we had a lot of interesting different kinds of music playing at home. So all the way from M.S. Subbulakshmi, M.L. Vasantakumari, M.D. Ramanathan, D.K. Patamal. To this end, we had Bade Ghulam Ali Khan Saab, Bhimsen Joshi, even Mehdi Hassan and Begum Akhtar playing. So it was quite an eclectic exposure I had, and I think so the exposure to different kind of music, sort of egged me on to explore North Indian music as well. And like a good Tamil girl, I had one Patavadhyar, as we say, one music teacher who used to come home. And those were very tough times, because when you're young and you have a Vadyar who comes regularly, I mean, you could, actually set the time on your watch, as they say. With his timing, he was so particular and so disciplined. He would arrive twice a week, and to me it was like, oh my god, why the hell can't he bunk one day? Why does he have to keep showing up when he's supposed to? And he would come home, and my mother, Padma Subramanian, who's a veena player herself, she would get into chatting with Krishnaswamy sir, as his name was, and they would talk about the various things going on in the world of music. And she would make him a dosa, or or an upma or something, because he would come from work. He used to work with the All India Radio, and then the class would begin. And it was when you're 10 or 11, it's quite the drudgery really gets you. It's like, oh my god, திருப்பி திருப்பி இந்த சரளி வரிசையை பாடணுமா இல்லை இந்த ஜண்ட வரிசையா, and why do I have to keep singing the same line again and again? Or he would say, he would teach me some very complex kriti in a very like a gambhir ragam, like Shakarabharanam or something, some Dikshitar kriti, which would be some very involved singing. And when you're young, you're wondering, why am I having to go through this? But that's the beauty of Indian music. It's the rigor which you are unknowingly a part of, and then you transition into something which is really like a flight of fancy, in many ways. So yeah, that's how it all started for me. And after 10 years of Carnatic music, I was fortunate enough to meet my guru, whose music I used to follow, and I had the opportunity to meet her. And she asked me to sing the first class I had, and I must have made it. I was so nervous, but anyway, I sang something, and then she said, "Okay, come from next Tuesday." So it just happened, and I'm grateful that I found my calling. Let's say, well, that's the short of it.
Wonderful. What a journey. Vidya, I was completely blown away with your voice. See, a storyteller tool, powerful tool is a voice, right?
Right.
Some of them have theater background and they do voice training. I know that Aruna Sairam used to conduct voice training in Mumbai when she was here. She's a dear family friend. But then, how did you develop? Because your voice is distinctive, powerful.
I have to be grateful that I think to a large extent it's the timbre of my voice is really natural, and I never tried to sing outside of my comfort zone, let's say. So my voice ended up being trained in that timbre and in that tonal quality, and my teacher Shubha Mudgal used to say that it's incredible how the tonal quality of our voices are so comparable, because she also had a very deep voice, and it was very interesting for me because unlike other genres of music, say if you're singing contemporary jazz or if you're singing opera, your voice projection or the accent on how you use your voice or the focus on how you use your voice is very different from Indian classical music. In other kinds of singing, as I mentioned, uh, you really have to concentrate on where you're producing your voice from. So, for example, in opera, how you use your chest or how you use your head or how you use your nasal passage. There are various ways in which you're focusing on how you're actually working on voice production. And depending on where you're producing the voice from, you're also working on giving it volume. So, but when you learn Indian classical music, it's very important to focus on how you're using your vocal cords, on how you're using your gut, and the breathing. So you're essentially working across these three parameters to create your own musicality, let's say. So, and of course, what is central to all of this is what we call shruti or pitch or sur, and that is something which is your constant. Unlike other kinds of music, which also explore harmonies, we don't have harmonies in the kind of music that we sing. So you establish your pitch, you establish your sur, and you stick to that. And it could go a little up and down, but more or less it remains the same. And around that, you develop your voice. So, for example, when you, especially in the initial training with your voice, a lot of gurus, not only a lot of gurus, it's a given, in fact, that you work on the lower octave. So if you have a sa, you work on the octave below that, because the more you expand that zone, the more your voice opens even into the higher ranges. So there is a science in how you actually train your voice and how you focus, therefore, on then. Then again, you do, for those of you who are familiar with Carnatic music, there is the Akara Sadhagam. So if you do sa re ga ma pa da ni sa, then you also do have to do ah ah. Similarly, you do ah. So then whether you do it in Maya Malavagavle or in other rag, in Carnatic music, you end up doing it in Maya Malavagavle, which is typically closest to Bhairav in Hindustani classical. So voice exercises which teach you how to control your breathing, which is very central to Indian classical. And of course, then sort of adapting that into more sophisticated presentations, whether it's the Khayal or the Thumri or the Dadra.
Thank you, Vidya. That was really very informative, you know. And now I want to come to the interesting part of today's session is you weave stories. Could we get a glimpse into the Bai Begum era, that I saw you perform in Udaipur?
Right. So, Usha, the thing is that the kind of music that I practice, it is very heavy on the oral tradition. So we celebrate it as the Guru Shishya Parampara. So the Guru will come home, teach you, or you go to the Guru's house, you learn. And there's a beautiful expression in North India, which really exemplifies the intimacy of this relationship that you share with your guru. It is called Sina Basina. So Sina means from your, literally it means chest, but it actually means from your heart to the other person. सीने मेरे सीने से तुम्हारे सीने तक, from my heart to yours. So the Guru Shishya Parampara is really this intimate space of sharing. And I think it's a beautiful expression to describe the intensity of this relationship and the many mysteries that are associated with it. So for example, if you look at a composition which is notated in a book, okay, and you try to sing it, you will sing it in a certain way. Sure, if you know, okay, this is in Rag Yaman, you sing it in a certain way. But the life that you breathe into it comes from this parampara or this tradition. Now, the fact that it is largely an oral tradition meant that for many generations, the student would keep learning from the guru, and then the student would then become the guru and start teaching his students, so on and so forth. So that's how lineages are created, right? But um, there was a big slice in history, let's say, where the dynamics of this relationship changed. How did it change? It changed because technology came into our listening experience. Now, when you're learning in a room, let's say, with just two people in there, you and your guru. So you are absorbing what your guru says, then you go out and you perform it somewhere. But if what you have learned becomes available for everybody to listen, then it changes the whole listening experience. It changes the way you perform, but it also changes the way you consume the music. Now, when technology first came to India in early 20th century, it brought with it many complexities. First of all, okay, this is a parampara which we all celebrate, which we respect. Is it okay to sell it on a record? Is it okay to make it commercial? For a lot of us who are in the world of traditional performance, the word commercial always makes us nervous. It's almost like you're doing something beneath what you believe in. So similarly, in the world of music, when this happened, when the gramophone came to India in the early 1900s, there was a lot of chaos. What do we do with this thing? But it came because the British wanted to set up a music market in India. So when they came to India in 1899 first, they didn't know where to begin because they were most unfamiliar with this music. So if you look at the memoirs of some of the earliest recording engineers, for example, who came from England, so the first of the companies which came was the Gramophone and Typewriter Company Limited. So if you look at the memoirs or the writings of some of these engineers who actually had to conduct the recording and set up the market, you will realize how far removed they were from what they had to do. So they would describe Indian music as screeching sounds, or they would say these strange girls swirling around in their petticoats, clearly referring to the ghagras that the tawaifs wore when they were actually dancing and singing. So there was this curious time when this market had to be set up, the recordings had to be done, but nobody knew where to begin. The guys who had to set it up didn't know where to begin. So at that point, a superb opportunity came their way through this community of singing women called the Baijis. Now, the Baijis were really an extension of the Tawaif tradition. So the Tawaifs, or the courtesans, who were the royal entertainers, they had the job of entertaining the patron in the court, or a zamindar, or would sing at important occasions like weddings or the birth of a child, for the landed gentry, or, like I said, the royal patrons. This is the community that was, to doing the singing and dancing essentially. So when the gramophone officer was engineer was asked to set up this industry, he is introduced to this community. And through this introduction, he meets the first diva of the recording era. Her name was Gohar Jan. Now, Gohar Jan herself has a very curious story. She was born to Armenian Jews. Her parents were both Armenian Jews. And her father at some point abandons her mother and goes away somewhere. And the mother, who is now living in India, converts to Islam and learns singing and dancing herself and becomes a performer of reasonable repute. Her name is Malka Jan. Gohar is born to her, and she decides that her daughter needs to be trained as well in singing and dancing. So Gohar Jan not only learned traditional forms of singing, but she also learned dance forms like Kathak from legendary performers such as Pandit Birju Maharaj's grandfather. She's said to have learned her Kathak from him. So in the year 1902, the first commercial recording is made in India. And between the year 1902 and 1908 is when the Gramophone and Typewriter Company conducts what is historically known as the first gramophone tour. And in this tour, what they do is they create makeshift studios. I mean, there was nothing sophisticated at that time. So they would create makeshift studios, look for local talent, which was popular, invariably the Baijis, get them to record in these studios. And in the initial years, the Baijis had a technological challenge because you have to understand that in this time there were no microphones. And unlike, we're on StreamYard today. I mean, to think that within 100 years, we moved light years away, literally, from where it all began, yeah? So initially, there were no microphones. And so there was a wax horn. For those of you who've seen a microphone, you know what a gramophone looks like. But in the horn, they would actually put their head into that horn and sing so that the sound would be embedded on the wax inside of this horn. And in the first few years, when there was no manufacturing plants in India, there were no places where they could publish the records in India. These used to be taken to other parts of the world, literally, a lot in Europe, in Hanover, in Germany. Then there were places in France where these records were also being published. But very soon, there was a company that was set up in India, Maharaja Lal and Sons, it was called. And they actually set up this plant where the machine was called the Tulika Baja, because it has these the record has these chudis on it, these rings on it, and so it was called the Tulika Baja. And very soon, India starts publishing these records, and the Baijis become the stars of the gramophone era. So my effort has been in putting together stories of these women who contributed to the making of the music market in India through a project which I titled Women on Record. And the idea was to celebrate the women who sang on the gramophone record. But interestingly, Usha, I realized that there's no record of who these women were. So therefore, there is a pun that, so these are the women who sang in the salons. And from the salon, they moved to the studio. So Women on Record is the stories of women from the salon to the studio. So if you permit me, I'll share a video. It's a short 3-minute video, and I'm going to request the audiences to bear with the bad sound quality, because this is almost like an original recording. And initial recordings were very screechy. They were not sophisticated at all. But this video is a collection of images from some of the spaces where the mehfils were held. And this is from a place in Eastern India, a place called Kolkata, which was a very, very important center for where this music all began, where these journeys of these women began. So I hope I'm not going to have, the other irony is that I keep talking about technology, music, women on record, gramophone, but when it comes to some technical thing, I'm always stuck. So I'm hoping that in trying to share the screen, I'm not going to goof up. Yeah. So let's try.
Absolutely. And the audience will bear with us. Yes.
Thank you. Let me know if you see. Are you able to see this screen?
You haven't yet shared the screen. I can't see the shared screen.
Okay. And now?
I still can't see. Ashish, can you step in here? Is there something that you could help us with?
You have to
Can you
share.
still not see the screen?
No, you have to click on share screen in StreamYard first before you can do that.
But I did do that actually. Hang on, let me try again.
Yeah, it came and then went off.
Can you see anything now?
No.
No, we can't see. So there's something wrong with how you're sharing the screen. Yeah, now it is coming. Hold on.
Yeah? Can you see it now?
Yes, it's coming.
Can you see the video?
No. Yes.
So this is a badi in Kolkata. And this is the voice of Gauhar Jan, who I was mentioning to you.
My name is
That was absolutely fantastic.
Well, it was also the atmosphere. You could have imagined, this is actually somebody's body in, it's a mansion in, sorry, something else is also showing up. In Kolkata, where some of these women have actually performed. So it's quite interesting. And the last image, if you all saw, was that of Gohar Jan herself. So there are many women who became stars of this phenomenon. And there was, of course, as I mentioned, Gohar Jan was there, but then there were also other women like Janki Bai Chappan Churi, there was Zohra Bai Agrewali, and so on and so forth. I mean, there are names and there are names. But the truth is that in the first half of the 20th century, about 250,000 records were actually published, of which not even 1/3 is accessible today. And even of what is accessible largely lies with private collectors who have been passionate enough to collect this music. So you can imagine the wealth of, traditional, popular, all kinds of music. I mean, they were not just singing like heavy duty classical stuff. They were also singing some very, very down to earth, fun, flirtatious, amorous, senseless music, which had English words, all kinds of music that was published through this gramophone era. So it was a very exciting phase of women, of music, of record labels, all of which came together to change the way we listen to music forever.
Absolutely, Vidya. That was wonderful. You took us into the gramophone era, and especially Gohar Jan. I remember a play in which Rajashri Sachdev was Gohar Jan, and she sang, and it ran to packed houses. So
Wow.
I can imagine that it must have been a wonderful era, and we are indeed grateful to you that you brought this out. You kind of fleshed it out and brought out the stories of these unsung women who sang
But even
such.
there is also a story about how I got interested in these women, which is quite actually because uh, so when you're learning traditional music, you feel like, wow, you're the torchbearer of a tradition. And my God, so much rests on my shoulders. And, there is an element of that as well. You tend to make these presumptions about your musical journeys. And once when I sang, there are many venues in India which are quite popular, especially in Delhi. There's one called the India International Center, where a lot of concerts take place. And it's kind of one of the more respected venues. And when I finished a concert, at the end of a concert, I had a very, very heartwarming response. And one elderly gentleman, sometimes elderly people who are purists can be quite, ruthless with their feedback.
Tell me about it.
So this gentleman was, he came to me and he said, "You think you can sing?" So I thought that was pretty rude for, considering that I had a fantastic response at the end of my concert. He said, and then he gives me two of these really like old, ragged looking cassettes. He gives me these, and then this was about 10 years ago, and he says, "This is the music you should listen to." So I actually dismissed it as, oh, I mean, I know how these purists, they're just so sort of over the top about what is right and what is wrong about Indian music. And I just put it away and didn't come back to those cassettes until a spring cleaning exercise was happening at home. And so I saw these cassettes, and he had made copious notes on the inlay. And it was all handwritten, so, and I became very curious. I said, okay, let me just look at least what is this. And of course, I saw that there were names and names and names. And I said, what is this? What are these? And I couldn't sort of identify even one of those names on the. But I could see that the bandishes, some of the compositions, I knew. So I found it I was curious about what is going on. And so, fortunately for me, I had a cassette player. And I played this, and that really opened up this journey for me. For me, it was like, who are these names, and who are the people behind this music? And I realized that in putting together this project, that finding the music was much easier than finding out who these people were. And I also feel that it's a great way of, I mentioned to you, and you also brought this up about weaving stories. I think it's great that you all do storytelling, because it's such a great way of connecting people to culture, to history, to emotions, to feelings, and to be able to do that with my music, whether it's Women on Record or my work with other texts like The Last Mughal, William Dalrymple's book, where I talk about the first struggle for Indian independence, the 1857 struggle. And in that performance as well, so of course we've all read about, the 1857 struggle in our history books at some point. And for those of you who've done schooling in India and are familiar with all of this, you would know that, at some point in class 8, class 9, you're reading about the India struggle for independence, and 1857 comes up. But I found a very curious set of other narratives, which also came out around 1857, which was how were the people involved in the 1857 struggle? What were the women saying when their men were going out to fight the Gadar in Meerut? And this happened because, a very respected historian from Delhi University stumbled upon a set of records, and these are not published gramophone records, but these were records. He stumbled upon them in Chicago University, in fact, in the library there, in their audio archives. And these were all recordings of recitations by everyday people, school teachers, some chowkidar, somebody who was working as an assistant for the British government, for some civil servant, or somebody who was attached to the East India Company. All kinds of people have recited poems which are related, several of which were related to the 1857 struggle. And ironically, these stories and these poems were collected as part of a linguistic survey that the British had done between the second and the third decade of the 20th century. So a lot of interesting poems which are in very, very local languages, songs which describe the Gadar of Meerut, songs, the dirge of the Begums when Bahadur Shah Zafar is sent away on exile. So it's a beautiful way of telling stories to people and weaving your music into the story, or weaving the story into the music, whichever way you'd like it. And so for me, it was a really exciting way of researching, composing, and telling my story.
Thank you, Vidya. It was interesting. One can go on. Like I keep telling, I think I have to make a request to Bharat FM that 30 minutes is not enough on Storytellers Cafe, because yes, stories can go on. Stories are so interesting that you could go on listening. But you have given us a wonderful insight into music and storytelling. And your work 1857, and you also been working on the other Noor Jahan. Sorry, I'm not getting the name. Begum Akhtar. Yes, we'll definitely have you next time to tell us more about it, and we would love to hear you sing. Actually, so I know that I haven't got you to sing tonight. But please, listeners on Storytellers Cafe on Bharat FM, you can go on and plug into Vidya's links, and you can definitely listen to her singing. And that is something, a treat for you. So thank you, Vidya, for coming and accepting my invitation to be on Storytellers Cafe. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you very much, and all the best to Bharat FM. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This is Bharat FM.
बजेगा भारत, झूमेगा भारत.
FM. ये है भारत एफएम।
बजेगा भारत, झूमेगा भारत।